What got you interested in making movies?
It's hard to say. I never had a real interest. You know, I mean, I come from a small town in
Where?
Modesto, just up, it's about 80 miles east of San Francisco. And I went to the movies more, it was an entertainment thing, and you'd go once in a while, and I never thought of it really as movies, and I never watched very much television. And
Did you have the desire to?
yeah, well, I always have kind of been into graphics and art and painting and stuff, and I slowly moved into photography. Still photography. It's just a kind of pastime. And then,
How old were you then?
I was I was in high school. I was mainly interested in cars, and I was working for foreign car service and racing sports cars and working on racing teams and stuff. And I ended up through photography by taking pictures of cars at the races. When I came down here to Los Angeles, I didn't know anything about film. I didn't know anybody in the film business, and I was completely lost,
Did you want in?
And I wanted in, just like everybody else. I wanted to get in. And I had applied to SC, but I hadn't been accepted. And I had applied to UCLA, and I hadn't been accepted. And so I was, wanted to learn about the film business. And
Hadn't you been exposed to all the talk, all the negative talk about Hollywood and how one shouldn't get into that horrible business and all that?
Really?
No?
Yeah, small town, I mean, there was no intellectualizing of it. It was just movies, And it wasn't movies as much as it was film that moved, and it was, when I got into it, I was more fascinated in the medium, the fact that it moved, that real childish intrigue of, gosh, look at the thing, it moves, and, it became a kind of obsession and a kind of real desire to watch things move and to photograph them.
What things? I mean, did you have it didn't matter?
It started.
I mean, didn't you have dreams that you wanted to make real, and that's why you wanted to make movies? One gets the image of a filmmaker having these, making a film just so he can realize his fantasies or something.
Well, I don't know. I got into it. I mean, I think of myself as a filmmaker, and I got into an argument once at a film conference with George Cukor, who really doesn't like the word filmmaker. I mean, he likens it to toy maker. And I think that's a real nice thing. I like being thought of as a toy maker that makes films. And that's how I got into it, is I was fascinated with the mechanics of it. I mean, coming out of cars and what have you. I was fascinated with the fact that you could take real life and put it onto an image and make it move, and you could manipulate it.
Real life?
Play with it.
Real life.
Whatever you were to photograph.
Not knowing anything at all about the industry and then getting involved really right up at the top with one of the best cameramen and so forth at the time. Did you encounter any shocking experiences? Were you disillusioned with the working conditions, or you didn't know enough yet to be?
I didn't know enough. All I really found out was that unions wouldn't let you into Hollywood. That was the first thing I found out, and mainly because Haskell tried to get me a job in several different areas, and every time the union stopped us, and even production assistant, they stopped. It was a ridiculous situation on that film, and so I eventually didn't end up on the film, and so essentially I turned my back on Hollywood. So I'm not interested in that anyway, so I'll just go to film school and learn about film, and I don't really care.
So by the time you were at SC, you did have some more than the general knowledge of what goes on in the industry then.
No. I didn't really get on a film set. I mean, he kept trying. That's the only thing I really found out, was the door was completely closed, and there was a solid brick wall at least 12 feet high around the whole thing. So the one thing is SC, the great thing that a film school did was that it exposed me to a lot of film, and I was just, enthralled. I mean, all these...
Oh, you started seeing a lot of movies.
I mean, you go to movies all day long. That's all you ever do there. And it was really an experience. That's when I really got excited about film, and I just kind of went crazy. Because when I went in, I kind of ambled in. I kind of, well, let's look and see what's behind this door. Because I didn't know what I was, I was like any other, kid, 18 years old. I didn't know what in the world I was going to do with my life and where I was going, and I just stumbled into this film school, and then there I was, and it was like the most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed in my life.
I really think of film as a language. I mean, really, the putting together of images and sounds in such a way as to convey an experience, a meaning that you simply cannot convey in any other way at all. And this little short had a kind of a dynamic quality that was really appealing. You know, the way it begins with this droning music, was it the Yardbirds music or some organ type of drone? And these colored lights going over the black frame and so forth. You know, you would look at that and get an immediate feeling, some kind of an impact. But if you really analyze what it was, you don't know.
It was that, and I've been trying to carry that through. It was a feeling, and that's when I did it. I felt that. And it was a strange thing, because I felt that was right, and I put that way, and I felt it when I ran it. I felt it, and I said, yeah, that works. And when you get into a bigger film, it becomes an extremely difficult thing to do. When you're in a little controlled situation, you can put something in that you feel, and it's very easy to do, because what you're dealing with is fluid enough to where there's no set, rigid things that you have to meet. I mean, you can just feel good, you can just put it there, and that's the only reason for it being there.
Did you find that it was not possible to work that way when you got into
on a feature? If you try to explain that to a studio executive, that it feels right, they go crazy. And they say, and because they don't feel it, because I don't think they feel anything, they won't let you do it. You know, you know, you put it in there, and
well, then I have a question. How did these very sensitive and beautiful films get made?
Quite frankly, I don't know. By luck, I think, more than that. It also, at the times. I mean, when I started, the feature effects, we were in a real little, you know, about 8-month renaissance there. All of a sudden, there was freedom, mainly because of Easy Rider. Easy Rider did a great thing, but it didn't last for very long. And the feature was started in that atmosphere of total freedom. You know, these kids are crazy, but we'll let them do it because it seems to make money. Well, when I finished the film, so when I started the film, I had all kinds of freedom. The feature, I had all kinds of freedom. But when I finished the film, when I was down to a rough cut, and then I was putting in those feeling things. This feels right, and it seems to work, and it seemed to work to everybody around me. The studio saw it and went crazy, because then that was when Airport had come out, and then on top of that, right, you know, in the middle of our battles with the studio and trying to convince them that yes, this works, that you may, you know. It works, honest, it works. We showed it to an audience, it works. Then Love Story came out. And they were even more convinced that they didn't care really what a preview audience thought. All they cared about is what they thought. And they were right, you know. Their mind is the mind that makes the difference.
Well.
And so that stuff ended up being out. And as I say, at a time, it runs in phases, you know, like art or anything else. I mean, there are times when everything is kind of relaxed and you're really free. Times right now are very hard, and there's not very much freedom. It all depends on the person, too. Kubrick can do anything he wants.
You got into film primarily, the motivation was not that you had something that you wanted to say, but that you had a language, and you just fell in love with the language, and something to say would come later.
Right.
And what came later was, THX, right?
Right.
Your first film.
Yeah, well, most of my first student films were very technically oriented. You know, they were mostly visual exercises, and the first Sex was really a visual exercise, and it was done as a lighting test. And I was teaching a class over at SC, and it just now I'm beginning to get into saying things. You know, saying I was. Well,
that was what, about a 15-minute student film made in when, 1968 or 67 or 8?
Yeah, 68. I think. It was finished.
I remember at the time I was writing some film criticism, and everyone, including me, everyone was impressed with the technical quality of the film. It was one of the few films that one had seen at that time in which there was a substantial portion shot off of a television tube and so forth, and it did have this rather kinky, futuristic quality about it, and this was very impressive. And also, having just seen it this morning, I realized that also that film was like, it's a chase sequence, the entire film, and I realized that's why it works, because it's just that, and there are built-in factors in a chase that, you know.
It's a very simple idea, and it was done that way because it was a lighting test. I couldn't shoot a film, you know. I had to shoot something very simplistic that I could put together and would be interesting. You know?
I think that, you know, THX has won a lot of awards. I'm talking about the early early film, which I understand has been retitled now to Electronic Labyrinth or something.
The school did that for copyright reasons. And,
but it's won whether it's a National Student Film Competition, what, once or twice, huh?
Just once.
Just once.
It won there, and it won Oberhausen and Edinburgh and a lot of places.
So evidently, most people think that it has more value than just a lighting test. I think that what impressed everybody about that short THX was its professionalism. I mean, it was really a professional movie coming out of a professional student movie coming out of an ambiance in which one seldom found that kind of professional approach. And that's probably what led you to the next step, which was going on to American Zoetrope and working for Francis Ford Coppola, or with him.
It actually was on the basis of that film that I got a scholarship to go to Warner Brothers, which I kind of just took on a lark.
A scholarship?
Yeah, they have a work scholarship where you get to work at a major studio for 6 months, for, about a little bit of money, and, you go there every day and watch them make movies. That's how I met Francis, was on one of those scholarships.
Oh, you didn't have to make, it was just to be there, just to
Yeah, you just observe. It was a really kind of ridiculous thing, because, you watch them make features, and you watch them for about 2 days, and you know everything there is to know about
I remember around that time, Francis had the maverick, the enfant terrible of Hollywood, where he had just made You're a Big Boy Now, and was making, Finnegan's
Rainbow. That was a very Hollywood thing. It was as a result of that. And our friendship, I was very kind of anti-Hollywood, and he was too, really, But
how did you get anti-Hollywood all of a sudden, having never made a movie in Hollywood yet?
Well, I was disposed against it mainly because of my first experience in trying to get a job, with Haskell and what have you, and not being able to, and being shut out, and I thought that was extremely unfair. So I was disposed against it. The only reason I took the scholarship was to give it a chance. Well, I'll go and see what it's all about, just so I can say I really don't like it.
And what you saw you didn't like.
And what I saw I didn't like, and was trying very desperately to get into animation over at Warner Brothers. And then Francis and I, became friends and everything, because we were the only two people under 50 on the crew. And then he decided, as a result of that, to go off and do The Rain People, and out of that developed American Zoetrope, where we would...
What was that? What was Zoetrope, or what is it? Or...
Well, it was an idea of the fact that you really don't have to be in Los Angeles to make films, or Hollywood. You can make them anywhere. Make them anywhere in the world. All you have to do is have the knowledge. I mean, the facilities that they have here, you can have anywhere. All you need is a camera. You can buy a camera. So we essentially bought a camera and moved to San Francisco. And said, we're going to make movies up here, and we don't need
The stories I heard were a little more elaborate than that. The word went out that Zoetrope had the state-of-the-art technology, and you had all these fabulous pieces of equipment.
We got a lot of new equipment in, and we had problems getting it working and stuff. A lot of experimental equipment. We were, it's cheaper because it's experimental. I mean, because nobody uses it. So we were going out on a limb on a lot of equipment and stuff. And literally, Francis had made enough money on The Rain People and what have you to invest in everything that he earned into buying equipment to make American Zoetrope work. And then we got the deal, after about 2 years of fighting for it, we finally got the deal to make THX. And on the basis of THX, we made enough money, again, to make Zoetrope go for another year. And but then, as a result of our disagreements with Warner Brothers over the final cut of THX, we ended up losing a lot of our projects that we were going to be doing for them.
I take it you're a bit embittered about this whole business with Warner Brothers, or not that, just the whole way of doing business in general in the industry.
Yeah, it's a fact of kind of resentment, I guess, that everyone feels when one finds that somebody who has the money, or as a result of the money, has the power to make decisions that are out of their area, but because they have the power and because they have the money, they can make like aesthetic, directorial, writing decisions, which they have really no business making. And it's in this country, the dollar is above the individual. A man's brain, a man's experience, a man's talent is below the dollar. The man with the dollar is the final say.
You seem to have arrived at a position that's perhaps opposite from the one that we started talking about this morning, was where you said that you became interested in film having no real conceptions about it, but simply wanting to make images that move together with sounds, and now your experience with the industry has perhaps turned you around where you now have very definite conceptions, and just making images is not enough anymore.
No, I'm moving toward another kind of film. Francis was in the kind of film that was exactly the opposite. I mean, I learned a lot from Francis's type of theatrical, stage-oriented, drama-oriented filmmaking.
You like that?
I'm moving toward it. I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm trying to, see what it's all about. I'm trying to play and moving around. I'm growing. I hope.
I was interested in the sound montages, the sound collages in the sections where there's a lot of action going on, a lot of people, and you hear electronic conversations and so forth. Was this done? I take it you shot those sequences silent, and then somebody composed these sound.
Walter Murch, who also worked on the script with me and who went to school with me. We worked together. He's a real sound man, and he did most of the sound work and the montages, what have you. And the one problem is that that's one of the things that Warner Brothers altered considerably. It was much more abstract and much more musical. The film was designed as a kind of opera, kind of musical science fiction film. And the soundtrack was composed under, pure musical concepts, and they didn't quite understand that. They thought it had to all tell a story. And so what essentially the biggest change is they've injected more story, what they thought was a story. That's the story of, they took out all the humor and the happiness and people laughing and stuff, because they...
Well, everyone's heard, by this time in history, I think it's become a bit of a cliche to sit around and talk about how bad Hollywood is, because, how many books we have and so forth about it, and what we know about that kind of production. But what interests me is that you've said that on the basis of this one experience, with this one film, they withdrew their financial support of all 7 or 6 other projects that Zoetrope had going. I can't understand. I mean, what has your film got to do with another, say?
Well, it was essentially Francis was the producer. And so it was Francis who had stuck himself out on a limb to make the movie. They were doing it purely on Francis's name. And they weren't doing it because they liked my films or they thought I was talented or anything. Because they don't respect talent, and they don't realize that it means anything to them. So they did it purely on Francis's reputation. And then when they realized that Francis was letting me do whatever I want, I mean, he would make suggestions and I would listen to him because he's a filmmaker and he's an intelligent person. But if I said, no, I don't think that's a good idea, I didn't have to do it. Where they are for, this is my idea and you're going to have to put it in your movie.
Well, this is the whole area around which the question usually comes up. Is film an art or is film a business? And, film is just film. And it's whatever a human being makes of it that that puts these qualities into it.
The problem is that making film is an art. Selling film is a business. The trouble is that they don't know how to sell films. As a result, they try to make you make films that people will go to without them having to be sold, which is the real key to the problem. And if they weren't so backward and, they just, if they can't put a film in a theater and have people rush to the door, they're not interested.
Well,
they only,
in one sense, THX is a very traditional kind of a movie. I mean, for example, it has all the qualities that one usually expects to find in any kind of a cliffhanger, chiller, futuristic kind of a movie. You have the doomed love affair. You have the very impressive technological ambiance that's there. You have the chase sequence. Now, I mean, how many thousands of movies have had chase sequences, which are just absolutely guaranteed to hold an audience? And this is, which we said earlier, was why the short version of THX was so, tight and impressive, because it was just that. And so it does seem that, what upset them? I mean, all the ingredients were there.
The big issue was the fact that I had certain ideas. I mean, it was a cliche film. It was a, kind of slapstick, old-time movie with, the Brave New World 1984 thing. And they saw it as Brave New World 1984, and they wanted it to be an oppressive society. I wanted it to be a film about the way I saw the world in 1969. The way I saw Los Angeles in 1969. That was the idea of the film. And they wanted it to be in the 25th century someplace. And the point of the film wasn't the love story. I mean, it was just a small vehicle in the beginning. The point of the story was the THX and his realization, more existential ideas involved in making his step to leave, and all they saw was the love story and the action and the adventure and all that kind of stuff.
What happened? What did they say to you? Did they get really nasty and I mean, what really? You seem to be so upset by this.
Well, I'm not really. I'm just upset. I'm more upset at the idea. It's more of a young idealist facing the reality of the fact that these people exist. It's, I guess, what most kids face when they see the government. I mean, it's the same thing as the government. I just face it with Warner Brothers. It's there are certain freedoms that people expect, and certain respect that people, to ideas, the respect of the idea. Coming out of school, and when you respect the idea more than when you realize that in the real world they don't even know what an idea is, and they just walk all over it.
Well,
and it's that kind of thing that really makes you angry.
Well, the chase sequence was, I guess, you probably resent anybody talking about any one sequence all the time as being representative of the film, because I'm sure you have your own favorites. But I thought it was extremely well done and had a very dynamic quality about it, involving these jet cars and so on. And you were saying something about why you had jet cars in this tunnel.
The thing that carries throughout the film is the kind of human factor, the fact that everything isn't the way it should be, because human beings don't make things the way they should be. They make them the way they want them to be. And that's the big thing in the film, where there's so much kind of askew things, People design futuristic societies and they're perfect, but society isn't perfect.
So the jet car chase was a kind of, to be paradoxical.
Yeah, it was also as a matter of, I wanted to get a very large car. It has to do with man, machine. The film relies basically on themes, and everything has a theme.
Well, I guess you finally got to indulge your love of automobiles with the chase sequence, huh?
Yeah. That was one of the things behind it. I always loved it.
Vicarious participation.
I love cars and I love chases, and that was a lot of fun. It was, it was also was that man-machine thing, of the fact that man. His relationship to the machine and his dependence on it, and his, lack of control of it.
Well, that brings up something that I think, this whole discussion has really been lacking up to now, and that is the whole man-machine dependency or independency as it regards what we think of as film. And, my experience with this has been from, at an age, we're about the same age, and I began writing film criticism, and it soon became clear to me that what I was trying to do was reform the audience, and really not write film criticism as is done in most newspapers. And then it became clear to me that what you really do not do, you don't reform human beings. You reform the environment that they're living in, and that takes care of the problem. And so, with regard to all this that we've been talking about the almost impossibility of doing anything that has any real integrity within the industry and so on, and really having any latitude and artistic inventiveness, there are certain developments that are going on now, and that will, within 10 years, within this decade, really result in a totally new kind of filmmaking and viewing environment. And that has to do with what I call the decentralization of where all the energy comes from, and the distribution of it, and mainly through cable television and cassette, videotape cassette distribution over cable. There's one thing that that we really haven't discussed, and that is that the very nature of filmmaking as it has existed for almost like 40 years, or more 40, 50 years, with the exceptions of the beginning of film, has been this highly centralized thing in which it costs so much money to make a movie that you had to address the broadest, lowest common denominator type of an audience. You get the most people to pay the most dollars to go into the theater and see this film, and therefore it developed what I call perceptual imperialism. That is to say that you have to develop certain genres, certain kinds of languages in film to get your audience to come back over and over again, to pay that $3 or $6, to have that same kind of experience that they had the last time, that it made them forget about how bad work is at the office, so forth and so on. And it developed into the kind of situation you have today, in where no creative work can be done. Well, the evolution of technology, and especially of communications technologies, in videotape, cassettes, and cable, really means the end of all this.
Right.
For example, in book writing, Jean Cocteau once said that film will never become an art until the filmmaker is as free as the writer with his pen and piece of paper. That is, until you can push one button and take that image, and then that's it, then you really will never be a film poet. And the things that are happening with cassette distribution and cable now really imply that that I would say surely within 10 years, but probably sooner than that, because all the cassettes are supposed to be out within 3 years from now, that you will have that kind of freedom, because it means that that you won't have to address a mass audience. You won't have to go through this giant corporate structure and reach millions of people to justify the film that you've made.
Right. It's the real problem now is that stranglehold that the distributors and the exhibitors have over over the filmmaker, because that's the only way you can make any money back to recoup your costs of making the production.
Right.
And as long as they have that stranglehold, we're just going to keep trying to get things done and never get them done. It's an interesting thing that really, in terms of the mass audience, the problem is that the people that are selling movies only want movies that they don't have to sell. I bring that up again
of
because
course,
it's their thinking, it's their laziness in terms of selling movies that is the thing that's going to make cassettes so exciting anyway, because of the fact that then you're going to have a much better sales program, and you'll be able to sell your wares directly to the people, and you won't have to sell as much. I mean, you don't have to sell.
It's far more revolutionary.
Millions.
It's far more revolutionary than that. For example, there is not now, nor has there ever been, any such thing as a mass audience. This is an illusion that's imposed upon the society by a means of distributing information. And this society has been for the last 20 years and is now really on its way in a transformation from a society whose economy is based on hard capital to a society whose economy is information. I mean, the corporations, the major economic force of this country is information processing. Whether it's done by a computer or an executive or whatever, whether it's done by a public television like we're doing right now, it's all information. And the whole society is developing to the point where you're going to have, instead of one mass audience, 100 small specialized audiences. But since it's a global distribution network, video cassettes are now a global system with like 30 or 40 cassette manufacturers all around the world. A global scale is bigger than a mass audience on a national scale, so that you can make a kind of film you want to make, addressed to the people who want to see that kind of film and nobody else,
right,
and be far more aesthetically and financially successful than anyone ever has been in the Hollywood industry,
right.
You see. And I think a few other things are going to come from this. First of all, it'll literally change the kinds of films that are being made. Right. I mean, this is the idea of the medium being the message and so on.
Well, it'll let more people make films. Anybody can make a film then, which is really the point of the whole thing, and get it down.
The individual becomes the equivalent of Warner Brothers.
Right.
Because you can say if you had $5,000, you put it into a 16mm film, you make that. Warner Brothers is making its $5 million super spectacular. They all come down on the same cassettes.
Right.
The distribution is the very same thing, and then it's just a one-to-one relationship, and then the question is decided, which one of these films is the most viable? Which one will people want to see the most? And we're into a whole new kind of experience there. It's the same thing as in book publishing, where finally in film, it's going to be talent that counts and not economic power.
Right. 12 people between you and the audience deciding what the audience wants.
Right.
It's just going to be you, and if you bring it out and nobody wants to see it, then nobody's going to see it. But if people want to see it, then they'll buy it. You don't have all this second guessing, which is what really destroys. You have the exhibitor second guessing the distributor, and the distributor second guessing the exhibitor, and everybody ends up trying to second guess the filmmaker.
Absolutely.
About what we know what the audience wants. None of them know what the audience wants.
Right.
Nobody knows what the audience wants.
And the audience itself doesn't know what it wants, because it hasn't ever, in the history of film, ever been given the chance to find out what it wants, because we've had no choice. If you turn on your TV set, you have 7 channels of junk that you didn't select to be there, and you have no choice but to turn it off, which is no choice at all. A definite ratio between the amount of choice that's available to you and the kinds of reactions you're liable to have to various things that go on in society. For example, along this idea of perceptual imperialism that I talk about in movies, the kinds of attitudes about life that are expressed in films must assume this. Again, they must address themselves to evidently what these 100 million viewers are obviously thinking about. therefore attitudes about what is the nature of love and life and how one behaves and the kinds of meanings and values that one associates with being an American and so forth. All of these are implicit in most all films made. And then recently it was very interesting. Easy Rider comes out. You mentioned Easy Rider earlier as being instrumental in setting up a kind of an environment of relative freedom in the industry that permitted you to do your film.
Right.
Now here comes along Easy Rider, which evidently really impressed a lot of people as being some kind of film about the death of America or death of some, I don't know what, you know. But it just struck me when I saw that film that here was a film that to me was the most traditional thing that one could think of. It had all the elements of a traditional dramatic beginning, middle, end, suspense kind of a narrative. With the exception that it just had a few different meanings and values associated with it. And this caused a great furor, big turmoil. This became a big deal. But if you have in cassette and cable distribution literally hundreds and thousands of different expressions from hundreds and thousands of different people, artists, multiplicity of voices about what constitutes reality, you're going to find an enormous change in the political and economic structure of the entire country.
Well, the thing is that most of the really interesting oddballs in this world have been filtered out
right.
of most media. So you don't really get the really interesting things. All the offshoots and all the really crazy
right.
things are, all the Van Goghs of the world are sent off into a corner someplace.
If I had anything really to say about your film, would be this, that I know that there's this feeling on the part of a lot of people in this country and the world about technology. In fact, it's the most traditional feeling, the Faustian view of technology, that we've sold our soul to the devil for this. But, in fact, technology is evolving to this decentralization of power, so that from a monolithic structured entertainment industry that we've suffered under for 70 years, the very technology that's putting the man on the moon is also helping you to bring you 80 channels of cable television. It's all interlinked into one system. Right now, two things are being decided this year, within 10 years, that are going to result in the most dramatic changes that this country has ever known, and that is the unlimited access to information and the unlimited access to physical energy through nuclear fusion, nuclear power.
Right.
So I would just say that maybe it's time to stop talking and to start working, huh, George?
All right.
So let's get at it. In Zoetrope, you're going to start producing a lot of educational and industrial type films,
Right.
aren't you?
We're moving into that market. It's a valuable market. There's enough money in it to make a strong financial background, and then we're doing something worthwhile. It's like teaching is.
Have you been talking to any of the cassette people?
Yeah, some people have. We've, that it's so new that it's hard. I mean, they don't, they're all running around.